generally, and a lot of the local government elected officials really want to do business in the drivable suburban pattern. They know the rules exist, and they get very, very upset when the city concludes that its future of this rural center is to have a Costco. And if only they had a Costco, their economy would rebound from the closure of the timber mill. And we're the bad guys as the Oregon Department of Transportation when we say, you can't put a Costco there because the traffic trip generation from the Costco is going to make the north-south, it's a freeway, but it's not an interstate. It won't function anymore. And we have millions of dollars sunk in that road, and no, you can't develop the Costco because we don't have the infrastructure to support it, and you aren't willing to pay for the additional infrastructure, whether it's mass transit or bikes, or they've got lots of choices on how they can provide the transportation to the Costco. But the tendency for a lot of real estate developers is to say, we want to do what we want to do with our land, and it's your problem if we collapse the function of the transportation system. And so it really is very difficult for local government elected officials. It's difficult for those of us on the commission and in the agency to stick up for the system, and we're trying really hard now to make sure that they understand that there are tools that are the alternative to signalizing an intersection, that maybe instead of signalizing an intersection and paying for the added lanes, what they ought to do is develop a transportation management association for that commercial district to reduce and shape the timing of the trips by the employees and the shoppers. So it is not easy, and it doesn't make us popular among a lot of developers.
I was just thinking that you're on a few people's hit lists, and you travel with a bodyguard. But as you can see, that if you're trained, if you spent your entire career driving NASCARs and you're asking them to do something fundamentally different,
exactly,
and they don't even comprehend what you're asking them to do.
Well, and the other thing is, and I think there are consultants in the room, one of the other things that we find is that there's this little nest of people who've been thinking and working and learning this new way of doing business in the metropolitan area, and I'll go to a town like Bend in Central Oregon, this rapidly growing community, and they don't know the tools in the toolkit. And so you're talking about development, financing, transportation infrastructure. There aren't any consultants in that town, and even though everyone from Portland vacations in that area, they don't seem to talk to the locals. They don't have the same tools in their toolkit, so they don't know about a transportation management association and what that can do. They don't know what will happen if they put in transit facilities for a bus system in their development. They don't understand how all the levers you have that can integrate transportation and land use effectively. And I think for the educators in the room, for the consultants in the room, building that toolkit for transportation, land use, real estate integration is incredibly important work because the elected officials in communities around America don't understand how to make the toolkit work. They just want to keep driving the NASCAR, and you need to say, gee, you can go just as fast and maybe faster, and it'll be really fun, and everybody will enjoy it more if you do something different. You've got to paint a different picture for them and give them the tools on how to realize it.
Well, now go back a few decades ago up in Oregon when you didn't have examples. One of the things, as a developer, I've done a lot of development outside of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia does not have that many examples of walkable places, which is unusual, of course, because Billy Penn founded the town as one of the great planned walkable towns in the New World. And you know, we've had massive zoning battles trying to get rezoning of projects that have alleys and are higher density and mixed use, and one took 7 years. It was just millions of dollars to get this thing out of the ground. It, by the way, is the most successful project in the region now. Of course, we're selling 2 per month, which, I mean, big deal, right? But in this market, that's a big deal. But you have examples now.
Right.
You can tell people, go take a look at these examples within your own state. Michigan you know, there aren't that many examples of walkable urban places. Birmingham and downtown and midtown are really beginning to come back quite nicely, but I mean, it's not as if they're everywhere that you look.
Well, actually, that's one of the things I think is really important. In Portland and in Oregon, we actually have a pretty regular routine now where a group of, and I'd encourage communities to do this, where a group of business leaders and government leaders and NGO leaders every year, sometimes twice a year, we go somewhere else in the United States or internationally to study sustainable development. And we meet with the leaders in those communities. It's been nice here at University of Michigan that people from all over the world are in the audience and sharing those lessons. But the city of Eugene, Oregon, learned about Curitiba, Brazil, because some folks from Oregon had been to Curitiba. They went all around the state, you know, telling the Curitiba story, and the city of Eugene really wanted a light rail system because they'd seen it in Portland, and they couldn't afford it. I mean, the numbers just didn't work out. So they put in a bus rapid transit system, and I really think that one of the most important things that people that are interested in this new approach to community building can do is go visit other places in North America. Our most recent Portland trip was to Minneapolis. I wasn't able to make it to that one. I did go to Copenhagen and Malmo and Stockholm last June. It's just incredibly important to go places to see the examples. And 20 years ago in Oregon, I think what turned it around, and this is another theme I think that's come out of the SMART conference, is that we really have to experiment, and it's tough to experiment with real estate because it's really expensive. It's tough to experiment with highways because it's really expensive. But a lot of these innovative solutions for community building, like transportation hubs using information technology, aren't real expensive compared to real estate and transportation development. And I think when people see an experiment that works, like iPods, then everybody else wants one.
Right, exactly.
And I think what we need to do in our communities is figure out how we can create the transportation and real estate versions of iPod apps where we've got a lot of people doing a lot of different kinds of creative things. One of the ones that struck me recently in Portland, I was flabbergasted. I mean, I'm pretty much into bike infrastructure, but we now have a big demand in town for parking places in front of businesses to be taken out and the parking space replaced by bike parking. And so the really hot neighborhoods in town, all the businesses and stores are saying, take the parking place out and put in the bike parking.
More customers.
And you know, the first one that was put in, I think all of us thought they were out of their minds. But the businesses saw the results. They saw their trade increase because more people were going into the store. And so I love this idea of micro experiments in order to get people to see the difference, and then national, international collaborations and visits to learn from one another.
One of the things that I do with the 3 classes I teach here at the university is that the classes are taught in Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Toronto, so that the students can see great urbanism and understand great urbanism, and in particular Washington, because there's 30 examples of walkable urban places in the D.C. region, 70% in the suburbs, by the way. So this is every bit as much about the transformation of the suburbs as it is the turnaround of the center cities. And 20 years ago, there were 2 walkable urban places in the D.C. region. That represents hundreds of billions of dollars of new development over the last 2 decades. That's responding to that pent-up demand that we in this country and we in this industry have this great possibility to, in fact, reach. So with that, I want to give it back to Sue, unless you have a question, Sue?
I'm allowed to have a question.
Of course.
Well, we'll make an exception, yeah.
Okay.
If it's good.
Gail, I love your toolkit idea because I don't know if this happens in real estate, but in transportation, we often get the kind of modal food fight because we're so fragmented. It's sort of like, no, you know, BRT is the way. No, light rapid transit. No, it's bikes all the way. No, it's cars. And, you know, it obviously has to be the whole mix. So I'm interested in knowing, I know, Chris, you're working on sort of policy levers. I'm casting about